I am delighted to be part of your event here in Argentina. I am Bárbara Fredrickson. I'm a professor at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and speaking to you from the United States on some of my research on positive emotions and positivity resonance during these pandemic times. You know, it goes without saying that these have been really challenging times. 2020 has been extraordinarily difficult for everybody across the globe. We in the United States especially have been facing extraordinary numbers of cases of COVID and difficulties creating consensus about how best to address it. And these challenges are individual ones that affect our own mental health, but also societal ones which affect the ways we connect with one another. And my research area is positive psychology. And, you know, when we're facing really difficult times, sometimes turning our attention to positive psychology and positive emotions in particular, which is my area of study, can seem kind of tone deaf, not fitting the situation. And that's especially true if we imagine positive psychology as sometimes it gets distorted to be, and that is in terms of this, you know, outrageous, inappropriate, toxic positivity. I mean, like, what is this guy smiling about? He, has no parachute. His emotions do not fit the context. And in fact, positive emotions that don't fit the context are known to be related to psychopathology, bipolar disorder. So we want to make sure that the positive emotions that we encourage people to experience, especially in trying times, are one that fit the context and also that are not covering up other emotional states, either depression or a lack of ability to experience positive affect or covering up negative emotions. When positive emotions are used as a mask, that is also associated with psychopathology. So it's important to make sure that the ways we cultivate positive emotions are authentic, genuine, and contextually appropriate. And when that's the case, being able to cope with difficulty and find a way to turn our downward spirals into upward spirals is in fact possible. And it's important to recognize that the kinds of positive emotions that are of value, especially in difficult times, are not the big broad grins of excitement. You know, they're a lot of the quieter positive emotions. And I've written about these in terms of listing 10 positive emotions: joy, hope, pride, interest, gratitude, inspiration, serenity, amusement, love, and awe. And there are, many different flavors of positive emotions. And in difficult circumstances, it can be the quieter, self-transcendent positive emotions, gratitude, serenity, hope, that end up being the best resources for us. As I mentioned, I've written about my research program in a few books for general audiences. The earlier one was Positivity, and that describes 2 decades of research on positive emotions. My more recent book is Love 2.0, which presents many of the early ideas that are the foundation of the research that I'll share with you today. In all of my work, it is very important to recognize that positive emotions are subtle and fleeting states. The important analogy is to think of them on the time course of a wave. They rise up, create some clear form, and then dissipate. Positive emotions, like all emotions, last seconds, maybe minutes, but not hours and months and days. When we're talking about longer phenomena, then we're talking about different phenomena than emotions. Emotions are short-lived psychological states that often went under the radar in science because they were so short-lived. But now we know that positive emotions fundamentally change the way the human brain works. And in particular, positive emotions expand our awareness, allowing us to see more of our context than we see when we're experiencing neutral states or negative emotions. This is not just a flowery metaphor. We know this from eye tracking studies, behavioral studies, brain imaging studies, that when our brains are under the influence of mild positive emotional states, our awareness expands, our peripheral vision expands. That allows us to be more creative and integrative, and it gives us a big picture view of our context. Now, that mode of thinking, that more receptive, expanded awareness, is itself fleeting. It's just as fleeting as the positive emotions themselves. But the consequence of that is having more moments of expanded awareness helps us to build and strengthen our resources, our social connections, our health, our resilience. So in addition to broadening our awareness, positive emotions build our lasting and consequential resources. They function like nutrients. So just like you can't be healthy by having, one vegetable in 2020, you need a steady diet of intake of fruits and vegetables. Our positive emotions are like that. We need a steady diet of positive emotions. They can be mild, they can be fleeting, but if we experience them frequently, that sets us on a trajectory of growth where we build our resources to become more resourceful, more resilient versions of ourselves. Those resources show up at a biological level. Studies have shown that our immune system, for example, reflects our recent past history of positive emotional experiences, especially those that are associated with connecting with others, with kindness, and bringing benefit to the world. And positive emotions end up being a critical ingredient in resilient coping. People being able to bounce back from difficulty, manage through uncertain times, and the ability to cultivate, self-generate positive emotions, even in dark moments, even in difficult moments, characterizes those who show the best resilience in terms of being able to manage difficult times. And they don't achieve that resilience by ignoring the bad. It's by holding the positive and the negative side by side and allowing more complex and textured emotional expressions. Now, within positive emotions, among the whole set that I mentioned earlier that were on the quilt, I used to think that all positive emotions broadened mindsets and built resources, kind of followed the broaden and build blueprint similarly. I used to think that all positive emotions, although they had different scripts and themes and fit different contexts, basically had comparable effects. I've changed my mind on that from seeing how positive emotions that we co-experience with other people seem to have bigger broaden and build effects and are more consequential for our health. And for that reason, I consider positive emotions that are collaboratively or co-experienced with others to be a superfood or a super nutrient. Just like all fruits and vegetables are beneficial to us, there are some that carry an extra load of nutrients. And that's how I think of these co-experienced positive emotions. And as an emotion researcher, this is how I define the positive emotion of love, that the most elemental experience of love may be these moments where we collectively and collaboratively experience positive emotions. And I identify this form of collective positive emotion as positivity resonance. Now, I want to give you a couple of examples of positivity resonance, and then I will give you a definition. In terms of, sharing a laugh with a friend is one example. That's a form of positivity resonance that fits good times. Holding your neighbor or friend, relative, when they're going through a difficulty and acting compassion, that is also a form of positivity resonance. Because even though suffering and difficulty might be the most obvious emotion in this context, there is also a thread of shared positivity that runs through it. And that's because when we're suffering and someone meets us in our suffering and says, in so many words or gestures that I get you, I'm here for you, that feels good. And when we're able to offer that kind of support to others, that feels good. And so even though, again, suffering might be the most obvious emotion in the room in this context, there's also a thread of shared positivity when we support one another. I think probably the purest example of positivity resonance would be, smiling at a baby, because when you're connecting with a pre-verbal infant, you need to do that with nonverbal cues and then really close attunement. Because if you come on too strong, that baby's going to cry. But if you get it right, there's this little dance of positivity and engagement that occurs that developmental scientists have shown is like fertilizer for healthy growth for babies and children. And we know how important these moments of positive, nonverbal connection are by what happens to children's development when they are absent. We know this from, studies of extreme situations like Romanian orphans who didn't have social connection. But we also know this from the more commonplace phenomena of postpartum depression or having a depressed caregiver, because depressed caregivers don't get into this synchronous positive dance with the infants that are in their charge. And so that ends up compromising child development in ways that you can pick up decades later in terms of social and academic development. So these moments of shared positivity, super vital for child development. And what I'm arguing is that they are vital for humans more generally, not just for infants and children. And so I'm arguing that positivity resonance may be the most elemental building block of love relationships. And the definition that I want to offer you for positivity resonance has roots in developmental science, as I've just mentioned, but also in relationship science. From relationship science, I'm borrowing this view that the most essential ingredient of love relationships, according to researchers who have studied love relationships, is investment in the well-being of the other person for his or her own sake. And that is when people do studies and say, imagine a relationship with this feature subtracted. If this feature is subtracted, people are no longer willing to call it love. If it's a transactional relationship where there's no care for the other person. And another view from relationship science is that describes what it feels like to have another person invest in our well-being. And that is, we feel like the other person really gets us. We feel understood, validated, and cared for. And that's a concept called perceived responsiveness. And so those kind of describe both sides of this caring relationship. And when it's reciprocal, that's a mutual care. And what emotion science, which is my home discipline, can add here is that these moments of investing in the well-being of the other or feeling understood, cared for, and validated are moments. They're not like a status that we toggle into and then years later toggle out of. So we need to recognize that these describe moments of connection. And those moments of connection are not just abstract ideas. They are experiential, they have behavioral components and physiological components. And once we start talking about multifaceted mind and body experiences, that's where the language and theory and framework of emotion science fits and supports our understanding. And then also we can bring in the broaden and build theory as a way to understand how emotions can have certain features during the very brief momentary experience, the wave that rises up and dissipates. And also they can have cumulative effects over time as they little by little build our resources. So that's the kind of two temporal timelines of the broaden and build theoretical backdrop that help better understand what love as an emotion may do for us. So the definition, scientific definition of positivity resonance that I offer is that it is an interpersonally situated experience marked by a momentary increase in three features that are intertwined, interwoven, and that is a shared positive affect, that is a behavioral response that shows up as a caring, warm, behavioral synchrony, shows up in nonverbal behavior. And then also a biological synchrony, which is a synchrony that is not evident to our eye, but is evident when we start looking at collective changes in heart rate and physiology. Over time, having moments that are characterized by this upwelling of these three features, over time that builds important resources like a sense of chemistry or what we've called embodied or energized rapport. It also builds our social bonds. It also builds commitment, loyalty, and trust. Now, social bonds, commitment, loyalty, and trust, these are ways people think about love when they're thinking about love relationships. These are the long-standing, durable parts that I argue are built resources built through moments of positivity resonance. So the value of this theory is that it, commitment, loyalty, and trust, strengthen bonds. These are things we often wring our hands over, like how are we going to create those? How are we going to improve loyalty and trust or build back the strength of a relationship that's beginning to wane? The theory of positivity resonance basically provides a roadmap for that. It suggests that by increasing moments of positive affective connection, collaboratively experience positive emotions, those are the building blocks that help build bonds, commitment, loyalty, and trust. And also, positivity resonance is a concept that describes how humans can connect, not just people who are in love relationships like family members, romantic partners, or best friends. Positivity resonance can equally be experienced between strangers, between coworkers. This is a form of everyday love experience, everyday positive connection. Sometimes we don't want to call those everyday positive connections love. The reason I do that is because I think it helps us understand how vital they are, because we all agree love is important. And maybe we need to expand our definition of where this important psychological experience occurs. Okay, I want to share with you some recent data on this. One is a way that we've measured positivity resonance, first by getting people's perceptions of it via self-report. So one way we've measured this is a scale that was published a couple years ago. We recommend that people use it at the level of episodes. So thinking back to the last interaction that you had with a particular person, you might recall that episode in your mind's eye and think about what proportion of time during that entire episode, from 0 to 100%, for what proportion of time did you experience a mutual sense of warmth and concern? Were you able to attune to and connect with the others? Did thoughts and feelings flow with ease? Did you have a mutual sense of being energized and uplifted? Were you mutually responsive to one another? Did you have mutual trust and respect? And did you feel in sync with the others? You can see each of these items is not just about your own attitude. It's your judgment of how the interconnection went. And so that is what we call the perceived positivity resonance scale. And we find that if we ask people to review, their whole day and go through every episode and complete this scale for every social episode within their day, we find that that is highly correlated with people's well-being. In particular, their flourishing mental health, which is a form of mental health that includes not only feeling good, but also doing good, making a contribution, having a sense of purpose and meaning. So perceived positivity resonance closely related to well-being, also closely related to low levels of loneliness, low levels of depressive symptoms, and some studies we've seen it to correlate with low levels of illness, self-reported illness symptoms. We have also found during the pandemic, during the early months of the pandemic, that people who are more resilient, these are data we collected in April and May of 2020, people who are more resilient tend to create more episodes within their day, even during stay-at-home orders, that are associated with more of this perceived positivity resonance. So resilient people are able to better self-generate and cultivate positive experiences, not just of positive emotions, but also of positivity resonance. And that predicts their superior mental health compared to people who score lower on resilience. This is a replication and extension of some earlier research that my team did after the September 11th terrorist attacks, some almost 20 years ago, where we found that resilient people were especially good at self-generating contextually appropriate positive emotions in a difficult time, and that accounted for their ability to ward off depressive symptoms. And here we measured mental health both in terms of its negative features, depressive symptoms, anxiety symptoms, and also in terms of its positive features, flourishing mental health and meaning, life satisfaction. So that we found this effect both for supporting the positive aspects of mental health and reducing the negative aspects. I want to share with you briefly some data we've collected on positivity resonance measured not with self-report, but through behavior and physiology in a study of long-term marriages. This is in collaboration with a number of researchers at UC Berkeley in Bob Levinson's Berkeley Psychophysiology Lab. And this is a study, I actually helped collect these data more than 25 years ago when I was a postdoc on 150 long-term married couples. They were married either 15 years or 35 years. Part of the study had them come to the research laboratory, engage in a 15-minute conversation about an area of conflict in their marriage. And while they were in that conversation, we measured heart rate, sweat gland activity. We videotaped their interactions. Those videotapes were painstakingly coded in terms of second-by-second measures of expressed positive or negative affect. And then the individuals in the couple came back to the laboratory some days later, watched the videotape of their conversation, and turned a rating dial. This is like an old school 1990s rating dial to indicate how positive or negative they felt every moment during the conversation. And from this array of measures, we captured many different indicators of the different aspects of positivity resonance. So we got a measure of each spouse's rating dial. How many seconds did each person in the couple indicate that they felt positive, even during this conflict conversation? How often did each person show, through nonverbal behavior, positive affect? How often did they show synchronized positive affect, what we call caring synchrony, or just moving in their chair in synchrony? And we also looked at the degree to which they showed linkage in their heart rate and sweat gland activity, and also created a new global coding system that got at this idea of positivity resonance as a whole, like just conveying the idea of positivity resonance to our coders and saying, did you see moments of connection, positive connection like that? And we found that when we combine all of those into a latent index of positivity resonance, that is a very strong predictor of the quality of people's relationships. No matter how we slice up this measure, it's a more potent predictor of the quality, the agreed upon quality by both husbands and wives of the relationship. And we find that it also predicts future health trajectories for the wives in these couples. That, these are long-term married couples, so they're starting off middle age and old age, so it's normative for their chronic illnesses to increase over the next decade or so. But we find that people who, in this one conflict conversation, the couples that showed the most positivity resonance, the wives in those couples didn't show that increase in chronic illnesses. So it seems like there's something health supportive for positivity resonance. And, we predicted this finding would show up for the entire sample. We only find it for the wives, so that was an unexpected finding that there was a sex difference there. We don't have a good way to explain it empirically. We do have some speculations about that, though. But this work and other work in this area has gotten me to think of positivity resonance as a health behavior, every bit as important as eating our fruits and vegetables and staying physically active. Are the degree to which we forge positive connections with others is a contributor to our long-term health. It is also a contributor to the health of our communities. I don't know what communities feel like in Argentina right now or anywhere else in the world. I do know what they feel like in the United States, and sometimes it feels like our overall community fabric is being strained so intensely that it makes me think as scientists who understand social psychology and social connection, we need to start thinking about how do we repair the strains within community and culture that we're currently undergoing. So this has led to a new line of research in my research team, the PEP Lab, where we're looking at the connection between day-to-day experiences of positivity resonance and pro-social tendencies, or what you might consider community-level virtues. And one way that we've been measuring those is in studies of doing diary studies where people every day at the end of the day reflect on their social experiences, rate their degree of perceived positivity resonance using the scale I mentioned earlier, and also let us know what kinds of pro-social experiences they've had. So I'm going to share with you some data from a study where we had over 400 people give us daily reports over 35 days. This was from data from 2019, so before the pandemic. It's where we have, more than 10,000 observations. We have people's reports of specific episodes of social interaction and the degree of perceived positivity resonance they felt. We also measured their experienced and enacted pro-social tendencies, their sense of spirituality. This is a non-theistic spirituality, feeling of strong connection with all life, or enacted, today I set aside time for an activity that I consider to be spiritual. We also looked at altruism, experienced feeling compassion for others, or, going out of your way to help somebody. We also measured humility. Today I felt that I have both many strengths and flaws, and today I let other people take the credit or enjoy the spotlight. Humility, we think, is a really important pro-social tendency that can come out of experiences of positivity resonance, because when people connect through positive emotions, there's there's an implied equality in that connection, that you don't see yourself as above or below the other person. And so that's where that feeling of oneness, of spirituality might be supported, and also the sense that other people are equally deserving. That goes with humility. So what we found in this study was that not only are there individual differences, like the people who experience more positivity resonance over these 5 weeks are also the people who experience more pro-social tendencies, spirituality, altruism, and humility. But there are also within-person, day-to-day variations. So days on which I experience more positivity resonance are days on which I show more pro-social tendencies. And that suggests that when we create more such days of positivity resonance, we also create more kindness and more pro-social orientation. And this study also had an intervention component to it. And we find that when we encourage people to go experience more of these moments of positive connection with, especially with strangers and acquaintances, we increase their pro-social tendencies as well as their experiences of positivity resonance. And also we increase the coupling between those two. So those within-person associations grow stronger. And connected to this, with data that we've collected since the pandemic began, positivity resonance, we find, predicts pro-social tendencies, measured in a similar way as I just shared with you. And that kind of validating that those measures predict relevant behavior. It predicts pro-social behavior that's kind of relevant to the pandemic, sewing masks and these are in the early months, and donating to charities or helping people who are hungry. But it also predicts important health behaviors that help predict public health, like washing your hands, wearing a mask. These pro-social tendencies that can be augmented through experiences of positivity resonance also serve to protect public health. As people come to care more about others, they're more likely to wash their hands and wear a mask. So positivity resonance, I'm arguing, is also really important for the common good, not just for our own health. And the important thing to remember about positive emotions and positivity resonance is that they're fleeting, they're short-lived, but they are also forever renewable. They are an always possible experience. Anytime that we are in the presence of others, we can choose to make those moments of connection ones that cultivate positive emotions in each of us. We, as I mentioned, that 5-week study included an intervention where we gave people a very brief psychoeducation about the concept of positivity resonance and said, go create more of this in your day-to-day life. Now, just by listening to this talk, you've had, a much deeper version of this intervention by understanding, some of the research behind this. And so it can be your choice just to go create more of these. People know how to connect with others. You don't have to tell them the particular skills. We just have to learn to value it more and prioritize it more. That said, there are other techniques that help support people's ability to forge these positive connections with others. My research program over the years has shown that meditation, both mindfulness meditation and a form of meditation called loving kindness meditation that focuses on creating warm-hearted, friendly feelings towards others. Those forms of meditation are associated with being able to self-generate more positive emotions in daily life, but also self-generate and forge more positive connections with others in daily life. And we find it's not just the formal practice of meditation that leads to these positive effects, but also informal meditation, which is, defined as the ways you cultivate contemplative moments within the flow of your daily activities. So, while you're walking or waiting, you might, take a breath and focus on your breath, or focus on wishing somebody well, just in your own mind. And that those informal moments, those fleeting moments of cultivating a mindful awareness or a caring awareness, those two, above and beyond the minutes you spend, sitting meditation, those predict an improvement in the quality of our connections with other people. Now, just as a kind of a hack or a tool for helping remember to create more positive connections, we know from research on behavior change that it can be really effective to come up with very brief if-then plans about when, where, and how you will remember to forge a positive connection with others. It can be much more difficult to do this when we're all wearing masks in order to protect ourselves from the coronavirus. But we can still find ways to connect with others. We can be more explicit with our words, since our nonverbal behaviors are somewhat hidden. We can make a special effort not to ignore strangers in our midst just because we're wearing masks. So if we make specific plans for if I'm out in public, then I will be more explicit about sharing my positive feelings with others in order to create these positive moments of connection, which we really need. So sometimes I think we tend to look too far ahead to try to find our sources of hope. And what I hope that this talk on positivity resonance may offer you is a sense of ways to find the sources of our hope within our everyday connections with one another, and how the quality of emotion that we bring to those connections. So I'd like to wish you well, and thank you for listening.